Okay. Good morning and welcome everyone to the virtual living room of Divine Visions Connector Network, a group that started back in 2015-16 to celebrate and honor Don Viapre at his retirement, but then extended and expanded to give us a chance. Many of the mentors that Don has been working with for years. Instead of celebrating Don wanted us to celebrate each other so that we could network and learn from and be a part of each other's lives and journeys to raise us up to the next level. Today we have two guests, and the theme for the year of our talk is be the captain of your own vessel. We will be introducing our guest speaker and also introducing the person who will introduce her. Eve Thompson will guide us through the bulk of today's session, and she will be introduced by Sandrine Kashwangwe. Just a few ground rules or things to note. There's a chat box. If anyone has questions, you should feel free to jot them in there. We will be monitoring the chat box, and that is available to you, as well as the raise your hand if you have questions once the program gets underway. We are in this Zoom room with the help and sponsorship of Andrew Frazier, who graciously provides us the space to come together, help us elevate one another through discussion and sharing highlights of our lives. So thank you, Andrew Frazier, who is the founder of Business Pro University. He will not be able to join us today, but we want to certainly acknowledge him and his contributions to this program. So people are continuing to come in. We welcome you. We want you to feel very comfortable. Don Viapre is on the line, as well as Caitlin Kendall Dines, and we are your administrators and will be here to assist throughout the process. If we have no other details to cover, I'm going to turn it over now to Miss Sandrine Kashwangwe.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Sandrine Kashwangwe, and I have the honor to introduce Eve Thompson. First of all, I want to thank you to have me in this. Can you? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please continue.
Yeah. So, Eve Thompson, I've known her for over 12 years now, and she has worked internationally for the past 30 years, where she has led projects for large international organizations, and she has also founded several of her own projects. She has a long history of promoting the advancement of women in Africa and beyond, and in promoting value-centered leadership in the world in general. She has led several country director posts in promoting democracy and good governance in Africa, and also directed the United Nations University's International Leadership Academy in Amman, Jordan. She also founded the Bus Factory Craft Center, the only one of 5 projects intended to anchor the revitalization of Johannesburg's Newton Art Precinct that was actually brought to fruition. When Eve first came to Africa over 25 years ago, she was struck by the persistent marginalization of women. In all the projects she led thereafter, she worked to ensure that the empowerment of women and the expansion of their numbers in leadership ranks were a key objective. And I was a witness, a direct witness to that. Eve studied English literature and law before working as an associate at a law firm in Washington, D.C., and making the transition to working in human rights law and contributing to the fall of apartheid and democratic consolidation in South Africa, and fighting for the rights and advancement of women and youth throughout Africa. She is currently working on developing internet platform for women. She has also established a consulting company with her husband, Richard, called RMAC, which focuses on risk management for companies operating in Africa. Personally, I always say I'm blessed to have met her, and now I leave the floor to Eve Thompson so that she can bless us with her wisdom.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. And thank you to the organizers, Dawn and everyone, for welcoming me to your forum. And it's really great to be honored and recognized by such an impressive group of people who are achievers in their own right. And just a word about Sandrine before I go into myself. She is a very, very special person to me. And that's why when I was asked, well, who should introduce you? She was the first person that I thought of, because when we worked together, I would routinely get calls from the US Embassy whenever a dignitary from the United States came to Congo, because they wanted to have the representation of the best that Congo has to offer. And of course, Sandrine was just the embodiment of that. And so she has hobnobbed with the likes of John Kerry and our current First Lady, Jill Biden, and so many other people. So she was always the go-to person whenever the US Embassy needed someone to show off from Congo. So, and she's just a wonderful person. She was kind of the sunshine of our office. And so I really appreciate your presence here, Sandrine.
Thank you so much.
So let me get started with, I also want to say that I just appreciate this technology, because this is allowing me to talk to you from Africa. And we didn't have this a few years ago. And so this allows us to broaden the conversation, particularly across the African diaspora. And that's something that I'm very much committed to doing right now. And I have always wanted to connect Africa to the United States on many levels. And so it's really great that we have this technology. And I thank Dawn for this initiative, for really moving this type of connection forward. So I hope that what I share with you will be useful to at least one person in the audience, if not more. And what I've planned is, just because I don't like talking heads all the time, you know, an hour of a talking head. And I thought it might be useful for to have some visuals. And so I have a video that was made several years ago by Melvin McCrae, who is a fellow Princetonian, and he actually made this video intended for a Princeton alumni audience, but it caters to any audience. And this just gives insights into my background and what I've been doing for the last 30 years. And it's a bit dated. It was made a few years ago, so I'm no longer the director of NDI in DRC. I live in South Africa now. And then we'll move to a PowerPoint presentation. And that'll be about 18 minutes, and then we'll have the opportunity for questions and answers. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen so that you can see the video. Okay, do this. And this.
Eve Thompson has worked in the international arena for over 20 years, working on human rights and democracy projects in South Africa, Guinea-Bissau, Nigeria, Jordan, and is currently the director of the National Democratic Institute in Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
I was always, from very little, drawn to different cultures. It was kind of latent for me, maybe when I was still in Princeton, but it still was kind of peeking just above the surface through. I used to go to those Thursday international lunches at Murray Dodge all the time. And so it was in me.
Thompson graduated from Princeton University in 1982. After earning a degree from the Georgetown Law Center, she worked for a Washington, D.C. law firm before landing her dream job with the Southern African Project of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law.
I literally took a half cut in salary, but I always say that if I knew then what I know now, I would have taken nothing. This was, a complete sea change for me in terms of my career direction. I think it linked me to my true destiny, to work in the international context, but also in the development sector. So my passion about linking with different cultures is also what was actualized from that career move.
The Lawyers Committee was created in 1963 at the suggestion of President John Kennedy, who encouraged the formation of a group of lawyers to fight for civil rights in the South.
This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal.
The Lawyers Committee's Southern Africa Project was begun in 1967 to aid the evolution to majority rule in Namibia and South Africa. In 1993, the committee sent Thompson to South Africa to gather information about the escalating violence in the townships.
My first trip to Africa was a one-woman fact-finding mission on political violence, because we were testifying on Capitol Hill and at the UN about the government complicity with the Black-on-Black violence. It was portrayed by the apartheid regime as Black-on-Black violence. And so they were trying to portray African people as not really being capable of governing. What they were doing is they were sending provocateurs into the townships in order to foment this violence.
Thompson worked to support constitutional negotiators as they drafted a new constitution in South Africa. She also organized U.S. observers for the historic 1994 South African elections. In 1997, she began a long relationship with the Jordanian-based United Nations University Leadership Academy, first as a student, then a board member, eventually becoming its director in 2002. It was there that Thompson worked with board chairman Queen Noor, the former Lisa Halaby Princeton class of 1973.
King Hussein and Queen Noor were the patrons of this leadership academy. We would always have the board meetings in the palace. My first board meeting, Queen Noor was presiding, and I was, very aware of, the magnitude of that. And thinking back to when I'd first seen her back at Princeton, sophomore year, she had been married for a year to King Hussein, and she came to campus. And I remember my roommate and I, we said, we'd like to know how we could become a queen too. And so we went, and the hall was packed. She was visibly nervous, you could see, because I think this was one of her first speaking engagements. We would certainly get to have a lot of interaction, her in her capacity as the chair of the board, and me as the director. We developed a mutual respect.
Today, Thompson's work with the National Democratic Institute in the Congo includes engaging youth in the political process and training women to run for political office.
We have a project from the US Aid. The focus is on to try and mainstream women and youth in political parties, because these two groups are very much historically marginalized within political parties. DRC is a very patriarchal country, so very, very difficult for women to occupy political space. We're just about to organize a campaign school for women, for political women.
The ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo has claimed over 5 million lives. It is one of the poorest nations on earth, but is the most mineral rich. Rebel armies, multinational corporations, and neighboring governments compete for Congo's vast reserves of natural resources.
If we focused more on the weak central government, then perhaps we would get closer to the root of the problem. It's easy to rape and plunder a country when there's nobody looking after the store.
Thomson remains optimistic about the Congo's future.
I think the Congo is an amazing country. It's produced a lot of amazing musicians. It's very culturally rich, but it's also a country of amazing potential. And so I'm also drawn to it because I want to help it realize its potential.
Okay, so just on to the PowerPoint. And what the PowerPoint will do, we'll just go into a little bit more detail. So crossing cultures is a huge motivation for what has led me to this work. And in my journeys, I've met so many amazing people and learned so much. For example, there are many places in the world like Brazil and Jordan that have a significant Black presence, but most people are unaware of that fact. And so discovering things like this has afforded me the chance to develop a comparative perspective. So for example, many Black Jordanians and Black Brazilians don't even realize that they share similar experiences, where in both countries, the majority population is in denial about prevailing racism. That, of course, impacts the ability of minorities to assert their rights. So where they have made some significant gains in Brazil, Black Jordanians have a long way to go. And so I've shared with my Black Jordanian friends how much they can learn from Brazil. So those are some of the benefits of having that kind of comparative perspective. In working for CARE, I got to experience the diversity of Africa, which is definitely not monolithic. When I traveled to 12 of 13 countries in our portfolio to examine how CARE country offices were operating internally and to what extent they were empowering staff to assume more leadership roles. Once again, some of the experiences during my visits offered some really life-changing insights. In Sierra Leone, for example, I went into the very mineral-rich interior of the country, where it is especially rich with diamonds, as we all know from the film Blood Diamond. As in so many countries that are cursed rather than blessed with mineral richness, the majority of the population are desperately poor. But I saw firsthand that they don't let the poverty define them. Of course, we are now seeing this popular uprising against some of the conditions in the country. But what happened with me many years ago is one of the most generous acts I have witnessed in my life came from a woman in a village I visited who offered me a parting gift of cucumbers when it was clear that she did not own much more than that. Later that night, as it turned out, I ended up in a small guest house where there was no food. So the cucumbers were my only option in terms of eating. So I got to experience what life was like for this woman materially, but more importantly, I learned from her about selflessness and sacrifice and how important that was as a regular practice in one's life, which I really try to be mindful of in my own life. So as someone who has managed offices in places as diverse as Jordan, Guinea-Bissau, Nigeria, DRC, Congo, South Africa, I have had the huge fortune of having worked with so many amazing young people, especially young people from whom I've learned so much. And that is another one of the huge benefits of doing this kind of work. So what would I do in my work? What were the things that so motivated me to get involved in this?
I'd plan and execute activities, including training programs, connecting beneficiaries to resources like helping Congolese stakeholders to learn from Nigerians on how they transformed their electoral process, or organizing a day at the Guinea-Bissau legislature to examine different pressing issues, or organizing a regional workshop for care staff on leadership and organizational development, or on behalf of the American Embassy, organizing a U.S. election watch event, highlighting the instructive aspects of the U.S. electoral process. In the case of connecting Congo to Nigeria, there again, I had the benefit of a comparative perspective. And that's what I really loved. Since I had been in Nigeria at election time and later in Congo at election time, I knew that one could learn from the other. We connected them via video conferencing. That was at the World Bank in Kinshasa. That was long before the advent of Zoom technology. So really, this is what I live for, just really connecting people, I'd say. That's probably a theme that runs throughout. So one of the other tremendous benefits of this work is that you get to travel to amazing places. And some of the places that I've traveled to have inspired me to write or start a travel blog. And that is called evethesource.com. And so it really captures some of the impressions of some of the places that I've been to, like the one pictured here, which is Lalibela, Ethiopia, or the one that's featured on my homepage, which is Agadez in northern Niger, which is just an amazing place. And so if you're curious about some of these places, you can please, I encourage you to visit the website. And of course, another benefit of this work is just the opportunity to fellowship with people from all over. This particular picture is taken at the Blue Mosque in Turkey, and I attended an international conference there. The woman standing on my right, who was pictured in another picture previously, she's somebody that I've mentored for a long time. And so you establish long-lasting relationships, and particularly among women, I feel that it's very important for us to connect across boundaries, because there's so much, even though we're different in many ways, there's so much that we have in common. And so opportunities like this international conference are created. When they are created, we have a chance to exchange and share common experiences in our individual lives and work lives. And so this is really an important aspect of this work. And I've also been very blessed to have interacted or worked with some awe-inspiring global leaders, even though there are two men pictured here, one of whom is immediately recognizable to most people, even with his face obscured, as it is in this picture. It is the women, for me, who inspire me the most. You've already heard about Queen Noor, but in the top two photos, the woman standing next to Sandrine in the upper left-hand corner served as interim president of Central African Republic at one of the worst times in that country. She was tasked with having to bring peace after extreme violent conflict driven by religious tension threatened to tear her country apart. We invited her to speak with a group of Congolese politicians, and as Sandrine can testify, it was an incredibly engaging and inspiring session. The middle person in the second picture at the top is Joyce Banda, whose story about her courageous battle to take her rightful place as president of Malawi should really be turned into a book and then a movie. It is absolutely riveting. I've tried to help her find an author for her biography. We're still searching, so if there's anybody out there who is a really great writer who's interested in helping out, please let me know. To get people to understand how underappreciated women like Joyce are, I try to draw their attention to the fact that while there are an amazing 9 books published by or about Hillary Clinton, who never actually became president, of the 5 women who have become president in Africa, only 1 is the subject of a mainstream published book. That, my friends, has to change. While it is very awe-inspiring to meet established global leaders, it's even more, for me anyway, inspiring to meet future ones. I love to work with young people. The young lady featured here was in the audience at a public lecture that I organized featuring Dr. Joyce Banda. And she asked the most amazing questions. Even Dr. Banda singled her out and said, "You, my friend, are a future leader." And so it's just for us to be on hand to help guide them on their way. And this is one of the things I really love to do the most. So now that I'm nearing the end of my career, I have taken my observations from over 30 years in this business to try and identify the gaps that need to be filled. And so these initiatives have mainly been focused on women. In Congo, I launched a project called FEMPO, which trained women on how to market themselves as candidates for elective office through social media. It was essentially an Emily's List for Africa. That was quite a big hit in Congo. 3 of the women that we trained were elected. And so our aspiration is to do the same thing in other parts of the continent, but we're still searching for support for that expansion. And then during the pandemic, I noticed that African children were being given comprehension stories about white American men, which really shocked me. So I tapped into my African network and organized interviews with established African women leaders and turned that into a comprehension reader, which is actually now available on Amazon. And now I'm working with young women here in Africa to establish a group-based intergenerational and diaspora-wide platform called Vocal, which is for women across the African diaspora to promote their intellectual products. And Vocal stands for Valuing Our Knowledge at Last. So this is still in refinement stages, and we hope to launch early next year. So for me, I would say being captain of your own vessel is all about taking risks and stepping out of your comfort zone to get to the place that you need to be. And that's really been my life for the last 40 years. I think that's the theme that runs through my professional life. So thanks very much for this opportunity.
So that's basically my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's
Wow. Nice.
So I'm free to entertain any questions, comments.
Well, I think that was fabulous. Thank you for sharing. If I may step back one moment, because you speak of, and your work is so focused on young people and women in particular, I did not mean to shortchange Miss Sandrine. And she is one of the people, young ladies, that you mentor. I had a little bit more to say, but out of nervousness, I kind of didn't do that well. But she too works to reinforce democracy building. She's a missionary at the moment, spreading the word, the gospel, but also has been and serves as a political advisor to the ambassador of Italy. So you can see more of the fruits of your labor through her work. And I'm so glad to be a part of this. So thank you both. You can all ask questions now.
Doreen, I want to echo your appreciation for the presentation that's been shared. I also want to point out, because I did hear, any writers in the room who may need to connect with you. And I want to point out the fact that the person who is leading the charge, so to speak, for this facilitating this webcast, Doreen Bethea, I just want to mention that she is an editor at the Washington Post and a journalist and respected journalist. And so thank you, Doreen, for sharing. I did notice that there is a question from Antonia Williams Gary. Would you like to unmute?
Who is also who is
Yes.
also a writer. So maybe that's the question.
I am not volunteering for that, but thank you so much, Eve. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I've had the privilege and pleasure of knowing you for some of your 40-year career. I am just so impressed. My question is, though, with the initiative that you have currently, where you're supporting women of Africa and their intellectual products, how much support do you get from, are you seeking from African Americans, those in the diaspora who are perhaps in better position with means and access and resources? Very specifically, do you need money? Do you need our intellectual support? What is it that we over here on this side of the pond can do specifically for you and this new initiative? That's my question.
Right. So thank you very much, Antonia, because that is a very, very pertinent question. We are starting very small. I'm working with a young Zimbabwean who is brilliant. She's really, really great. And once again, it's a real pleasure so much from them, and they know how to work to navigate around the internet far better than we do. So it's just a perfect combination. And as I mentioned, this is an intergenerational. I'm really wanting to emphasize the intergenerational nature of this platform as well. And so right now, I'm just using my own meager means for this. And so absolutely we need support, and we were wanting to start small here in Africa. And one of the things, because we want to promote the intellectual products of everyone, but what is, African-American women, probably out of all of the people in the African diaspora, it's shocking actually how much underrepresented women in the UK are, even though there are many, many strong Afro-British people who are generating amazing intellectual products. But African-American women are clearly by far in the lead. If you go on the internet, they're the ones that you see. But African women are really at the bottom. And so we do want to promote those kind of almost as an affirmative action initiative to promote African women products more than the others initially. But if we can get help from people who really appreciate what we're trying to do from countries where there are more resources, that's absolutely welcome. And, I'm happy to talk to you, Antonio, offline about this, because that's great that you have an interest. Thank you.
Okay. I believe Yvette Jordan has her hand up. You have a question?
I have a question and a comment. I have a couple of questions. First, Eve, your presentation was phenomenal, and
Thank you.
showing everything. Eve and I have been friends since '95 when I went over to South Africa. And even though we are good friends, just seeing your presentation and reiterating who you are, brought tears to my eyes. Even though I know you, it's just like, wow, she's awesome. So my question is, when I went there in '95, and I think you and I observed how Western countries were encroaching on South Africa in particular, and then the nation as a whole, and continued to do that over centuries. But at that time when the Blacks were in charge, were really doing it. So I'm curious about your observation in terms of Western nations, and I don't want to reference the US, although yes, I am asking about us as well. Are we still doing that, girl? We still doing that? So I'm curious about that. And then what you said in terms of assistance, in terms of what you're doing from US and from African Americans in particular. I know, for example, Eve has asked me with assistance with her book, and I'm a teacher. So would you help in terms of that? So for other people, if you know other educators, and this is a plug, I guess, for Eve, she may not say this, however, I'm saying it for you, Eve. If you know of educators who may want to use her book, or a district in terms of really getting this into the schools, it's important. So you didn't ask me for that, I'm just doing it.
I appreciate it.
But really, in terms of my first question, I'm wondering about your comments.
Yeah, so that is a very complicated question. I can actually link it in a way to your other question, because I have actually resisted trying to seek funds from bilateral institutions, particularly the US government, because that institution in particular, there are huge strings attached. And not only that, you end up having to do what they want you to do. And also when they get bored with you, then you're out of luck. And so I want these initiatives to be sustainable. And so that's what's made it really more difficult, however, to generate resources. And one of the things that I've wanted to do is look at how, particularly with the vocal initiative, how women, Black women ourselves, can generate our own resources on our own, with our own intellectual capital. And so that's what this is really all about. It's a kind of a longer, harder road to pursue, rather than just writing a proposal and submitting it and maybe getting funding. But that's what we're trying to do. And it would be great to, have a brain trust. And I haven't really created that yet, a brain trust of us who can really generate the maximum number of ideas in order to crack this nut, because I feel like it is a nut, but it can be cracked. So that's that. But in terms of, the relationship between the West and Africa in general, it's a complex relationship. The colonialism has never stopped. It's still there, with the Bretton Woods institutions that have really perhaps done a lot more damage to Africa than good. At the same time, at some stage, Africa has to assume responsibility for its own challenges. Obviously, some of these challenges were created by Western countries. But I always compare, what's happening in Africa. If you look at a very micro situation like your own family, if you start to blame your problems on things external to you, you'll never actually solve some of those problems, because you've just got to look at, well, what are you contributing to the problem? Not to say that there aren't external actors out there who are doing things that are affecting your situation, but the only thing you can really work on is what you have control over. And so, for example, my husband works in the mining sector, and there's a lot of, for example, and Sandrine can testify to this, that often external or people in the West will say, or even, some of the Africans will say, the mining companies need to pay their taxes, when in fact, the challenge is the management at the central government level is not managing the resources properly. And so even at the micro level, and Sandrine can testify, when I was managing offices in Africa, people would come to me, individuals, and say, can you figure out how I can pay the minimal amount of taxes? Because we know that they're going to mismanage it when we give it to them. And so it's, two sides of a coin. And, what we're seeing here in South Africa is just massive amounts of corruption. So bad that it's getting to the point where it's violent, it's very mafia-esque. I don't know for anybody who's actually followed the situation, and I see Andre Young, who is South African, who works in this context, has just joined. It's been really, the current president is seen as someone who's got his hands tied because the mafia is so in control. And a few years ago, under the previous president, there was an Indian family who basically captured the state. And we just finished a commission that lasted, Andre could correct me if I'm wrong, a year or so, that investigated this Indian family's involvement with the former president. And it's just, it's a story that should be captured in a movie in terms of, what they did to this country. And it left that mafia-esque flavor up to this moment. And how we get past this moment is a huge question. Andre, I see you there. Maybe you can actually contribute to this part of the discussion.
Thank you, Eve. I will make one or two comments about it, but the reason I raised my hand was not to get into the politics of South Africa. I met Eve on another continent, in India, on a little town on top of a mountain, in a time where we went to spend some time in silence. So we didn't get to spend a lot of time talking, but in silence, I was able to connect to her. And I'm absolutely inspired and thankful that I joined today to hear your total story, because I hadn't heard it before today. I think the work that you're doing to connect and think with others, Sandrine and so many other beneficiaries, is absolutely inspiring. Oh, I can't wait to introduce my daughters to you. And yes, I did miss you in Cape Town the other day for a cup of tea. So when you're next year, I will clear schedules to make sure that we do host you for a cup of tea with your husband.
I'll be back next
week,
next weekend, actually.
Next weekend is a good weekend. I will make it happen. But I think to the work that you're doing to in fact ignite the genius in the young people and the women that you are engaging through Vocal. My question to you was, yes, indeed, how do we begin to put those intellectual assets to use in the generation of economic transactions and income for these young people and these women, in order that we might progress the inequality that we see in our continent, and indeed in line with what the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are looking for. Because if we're going to get the equality right, specifically the gender equality, and get to well-being economics, then that's my question. And I'd like to have you answer that. But to your comment around corruption, we're going through a cycle like every African country that's taken over its democracy from colonialist past. And this country is some it's a 26 to 30-year-old child growing up. It hasn't found its discipline yet, but typically, these countries get to discipline at the age of 35 through 45. We're praying that that comes there. We have a tide of corruption to turn, but I think the work that you're doing, connecting to women, empowering them, thinking with them, letting them become economic players, and through Vocal, making that at last become their playground for becoming the leaders of the world, is part of the answers to growing this nation up, and in fact, becoming the place from which humanity can be served. but so that my question was, what are your thoughts around getting this brain trust together to, in fact, make these economic transactions become exponential and scale so that income can flow to the beneficiaries, specifically the woman, and two, I think that our answers this question of moving beyond this corruption to where the democratization of revenues and the spread of the concentration of wealth that we see in our country now can happen via ethical and moral means, not the corrupt means we've observed to date. Now leave it there and then wait for your answer.
Thank you, Andre. When I see you in Cape Town this weekend, I will formally invite you to be part of the Brain Trust. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge challenge because in terms of translating intellectual assets and capital to hardcore cash is a challenge, I think, particularly in Africa. I think one has to generate the demand for intellectual capital, which is a challenge. And one of the reasons I wrote the book for children is I thought we need to start there. Because first of all, we need to generate this textbooks for children. That's actually a requirement. And so, but the problem is, I mean, I don't know how it is in the rest of Africa, but especially during lockdown, I had a chance to see that my kids here in Africa were reading comprehension readers about dead white American men. The only South African that they read about was, well, actually two, was Christian Barnard and Naki, who was his assistant. And that was it, no women at all. And so that's one of the reasons why I just decided to write this book. And so we need to start somewhere where there's a natural demand for intellectual products. And at the school level, that's, I think, where it is. And then also at the university level. And so I think we, yes, I really would appreciate having a brain trust to really help me think that through. But we are also with Vocal appealing to, we haven't started yet, but appealing to audiences to just begin to think of themselves as sources of intellectual capital. People who might not think of themselves as writers. I actually joined a writing platform and started just doing travel writing because I was now motivated to do it. And they had kind of a reward system for people who wrote the best blogs. And that's how I ended up getting doing my travel blog, but I hadn't really thought about doing that before. So we're trying to get people who might not think of themselves as writers or authors. It's, again, one of the reasons why Joyce Banda, former president, still up to this point has no book. So we need to really, really push harder to try and generate that intellectual capital that will translate into economic transactions here in Africa. Hope that answers a little bit. Thank you.
If I may, Ms. Eve, I was interested in 2 points, actually several points, but I would like to start here. When you talk about the Congo and describe it as an amazing place, and you want to help it realize its potential, where do you see the country's status at this point and how far it needs to go to reach that full potential?
It's really been challenged politically and particularly by political leadership. And we have had transfer of power, peaceful transfer of power in the last 3 elections there, which is good. However, the quality of the leadership is very, very poor. That is rooted in the history of the country, dating back to when it was called the Belgian Congo, and it was the personal property of the former king of Belgium. And he was somebody who brutalized the Congolese. And then there was a period of when they emerged into independence, there was a lot of civil strife that led to the death of Patrice Lumumba, and then the emergence of Mobutu Sese Seko, who was there for 33 years, something like that. And what his rule did is it entrenched a mindset of, grab whatever you can when you are in power. And that has continued from then up to this day. And it also trickles down to the average, civil servant. And in fact, Mobutu, and maybe Sandrine can correct me if I'm wrong, but Mobutu, he didn't introduce this, but there was this informal article of the Constitution called Article 15. And that was the article that said, if you're a civil servant, you should use your job to extort money. And I witnessed it almost every day in the Congo, particularly with traffic cops. When I remember I was stopped once for some kind of traffic violation. And in some ways, it's very efficient because they're motivated because you're supposed to pay them, not the government. And I was stopped, and there were two policemen, and I gave them my driver's license, and they saw that it expired that day. And so there was an argument for about 10 minutes as to whether or not they should take money from me, because should it be today, or should they wait until the end of the day? So anyway, it's really hard to see without some really, really strong leadership at the top, which is not the person who's at the top now, is the son of someone who was in the opposition for a long time, Etienne Tshisekedi. He is the son, and so in a sense, he finally realized his father's aspiration. But he's someone who is undereducated. He actually conspired with the previous president to marginalize the person who was the actual choice of the opposition to be, who was supposed to be put forward, who was running in the election. And so the election was rigged in order to, or the election results, the election wasn't rigged, the election results were rigged, so that he could become president. So it's, as long as this kind of thing can continue in the country, it will be very, very difficult. And the other problem is, as I've said in the video or in the PowerPoint, the curse of mineral richness is quite unfortunate. This country should be richer beyond measure. And it is not, it's actually desperately poor because of all of the people who are competing to have access to that wealth, including the neighboring countries, the strong men who lead the neighboring countries like Rwanda and Uganda, as you saw in the video. And so there are a lot of people who are meddling. Where I lived in Eastern Congo, in Goma right now, is a very dangerous place to live. I mean, I can't believe I actually brought my elderly parents to live there. And we were very fortunate that everything was pretty calm at that time. But right now, There's a lot of encroachment from neighboring countries, again, who are attempting to access the wealth. The Secretary of State of the US just visited Congo recently, and he actually went to Rwanda and made kind of he sort of admonished the president of Rwanda to stay in his lane, basically, and not meddle in the Congo. But it's really hard for people when they know they're a small country right next to a huge country that is rich with numerous minerals. It's really hard for them to keep away. So there are just a lot of actors. There's a guy from Israel who's been, he was very close friends with the previous president, who is constantly meddling, and he's really gained enormous wealth from his involvement in the Congo and his friendship with the former president. So there's so many people who are really working hard to keep that country where it is, and who benefit from the status quo. So yeah, it needs a change of leadership.
Okay.
I don't know, Sandrine, maybe you would like to answer the question also? Are you still there? Let's see if she's still here. Maybe not. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's basically the answer to the
Okay.
question.
Hi, yeah,
Thank you.
no, I think Eve just summarized the situation quite well. So, like, the governance issue is still there, and the corruption level is increasing, actually. So yes, we have a serious problem on that. And we're supposed to have elections next year, but I don't know if you followed the recent development in the eastern part of the country, Goma, and a rebellion that started some months ago, supported by Rwanda. So there's a lot of uncertainties about election, about leadership change. So yeah, that's the main challenge right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. If I may, Eve, I'm curious about any themes or sort of consistent challenges you find among the young women that you're mentoring. At what point do you find them and striving to take them? Anything common that you've seen over time?
The challenges they face?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I can think of two cases. One woman that I mentored in Congo, she is someone who I just happened to meet at the US Embassy when they were organizing some kind of seminar, and she ended up working with me as well. She actually organized a protest for women in Kinshasa, who were, because there was a spate of, again, Sandrine might be able to speak to this, but there was a spate of attacks on women in taxis, which was, it became a bit of just a pattern. And so she organized a protest action. And so definitely one of the biggest challenges, particularly in a place like Congo, it's a very patriarchal country, and women are still very marginalized and seen as people. I mean, I've talked to politicians. A leading politician that I talked to told me that a friend of hers who was she was a minister of state, like a cabinet secretary. And her husband had this rule that she could not leave the house after 7 o'clock. And some men who wanted her to sign a document came to her house because they knew she couldn't leave. And I think what happened was she ended up getting a divorce as a result of the fact that these men came to just have her sign a document because, and her husband was upset about it. So, it's these, and often women politicians are called prostitutes because they're promoting themselves outside the home. And that's all over Africa. And so that's a huge problem. The Korean woman who's pictured in a few pictures in my slides, she holds a PhD, but she told me that when she got her PhD in the UK, and she really struggled. She really struggled because there was this attitude on the part of the people in the UK that Asian women were only there to find husbands. And in fact, she overheard somebody say that. And so, it's a real, we have a long road as women in the world. And I've seen, I can tell you the Black Jordanian women, I actually was friends with a Sudanese woman who was brought to Jordan to open the Four Seasons Hotel in Jordan. And she was determined to have a Black woman to work the front desk. And so when she went to recruit these Black women, they all wear the hijab. And part of the reason they wear the hijab is because they don't want to show their hair because it's different from everybody else. And so the one woman she wanted to hire was a woman like that. And the woman said, what can I do with my hair? Because she didn't want them to wear the hijab. So just a lot of problems that you just wouldn't think are out there are out there.
I'd like to give someone else a chance to ask a question. I have some others, but I'll sit quiet for a moment. Because I am curious too, if you look at what's going on here in the United States and actually around the world with a lot of countries pushing for autocracy versus democracy. Here we have a democracy in the United States that looks like it's, efforts are to tear it down, and you're working to build democracies up. It's quite a contrast. And then you throw in, the Hungaries and the Viktor Orbans. My concern about where we're going as a nation, my freedoms as a woman here in the States and the world. Things I thought were put to bed. We're fighting again, as you probably know. But this threat to democracy here in the US is like, wow, really, y'all? For real?
Yeah. No, I've often felt like a huge hypocrite when I'm getting US government money and going in to work on promoting democracy in some of these countries when my own country has huge problems around this. And it's incredible. When I organized the Election Watch Party in 2012 in Kinshasa, it was so oversubscribed. Again, Sandrine can testify to that. You could hardly move. And it was a testament to the fact that the US is regarded by so many people, very highly regarded, and is looked to as a beacon of hope. And now that we're seeing the deterioration of democracy, where can people look to? And so it's a real challenge. People don't realize how important it is for us to retain our democracy, the integrity of the electoral system and all of that, because so many people look to us as a model. So important.
Yeah, thank you.
Eve, I just really thank you for a very comprehensive presentation of your journey and what is taking place in various parts of the Congo. And I want to comment first by putting it in context for some who are present and some who will watch this later, that when Eve is referring to the continent of Africa, we should realize that it is a huge continent. It actually can fit the size of United States of America 3 times. And its problems, as she stated, emanate specifically from the days of its invasion and leading up to colonialism, and currently undergoing what is called by Kwame Nkrumah as neo-colonialism, which is the new colonialism. And it was predictable, as he and others stated at that time in their struggles against colonialism, because if you don't have a politically educated population, then that population can be easily steered and diverted by various means and various persons who have their own objectives. And so what you have is divisions, you have conflicts, you have opposing forces, etc. I also want to go back because colonialism as we know it, and not having been taught it in any educational institutions, and that's why I'm lingering on this for the sake of others, was really given its breadth and its term when there was a 2-year party, and I mean party, in Berlin, known as the Berlin Conference in 1884 and 1885, where the heads of states and in Europe and their cohorts sat and divided up the continent of Africa. And that is why places like Tanganyika, now known as Tanzania, is and was ruled by the Germans. And that's why King Leopold inherited from Belgium, inherited and the Congo, and used the Congo literally to build the foundation of Belgium, as is stated in King Leopold's soliloquy, which is a very small book, and I strongly recommend that everybody gets a copy and shares that copy, because it shows the brutality of colonialism, especially in the Congo by King Leopold of Belgium. And it shows how wealth is intentionally transferable and still is today in order to support and subsidize economies. And finally, I'd like to recommend the book by the Caribbean historian and author, Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, in which he clearly shows in his accounts of wealth transfer and intentional oppression and exploitation, which is still relevant today. So Eve, your work with young people, especially young women, is, I think as Andre pointed out, I believe strongly and concur with him, that is the salvation, because the struggle of our people have always been ignited and inspired by the struggle of our women. Our women are really historically, in all cultures, including our culture, have taken a formidable moment and movement to push all of us forward. And so I really encourage you and will support everything that you do in this vein. and I pledge that today.
Okay.
And I want you to know that dialogue, conversation, protracted political education of young women, um, especially connecting the past with the present and laying the plans for the future, is something that needs to spread and spread fast and in an organized manner, because the more organized we are is the more that we can oppose those who seek to organize us. The reason they are still perpetuating their programs and their activities is because we are unorganized, or we don't have enough of us in organization. So um, I always push for organization. I always push for organizing, but specifically, or young people are the solution of our future. And I know that you're on track. I just wish there were over 1 million of you like Eve. And those I'm sure that are out there need to be connected with the Eves that are doing what they do. And so I urge you to see if you could recognize in other countries other Eves that exist and band together and move the nation and the continent forward.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, Don. There's so many initiatives on the continent, and I always say to myself, how can we actually bring them all together? Because you are absolutely right. There's strength in numbers and coordination and organization. And, I was just invited by Joyce Banda, the former president of Malawi, to an event that she had. She always has an event in April on her birthday, and she invites people to come. But this one was very, very impressive because she managed to get just about most of the women who occupy very high positions in Africa. So there was Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was there, the former president of Liberia. The current vice president of Liberia was there. The current vice president of Zimbabwe. The former, the woman who was featured, the woman who was from Central African Republic, who I mentioned, she was there. I got to see her again. And so it was a formidable gathering of very powerful women. And we need those kinds of gatherings as much as possible, and gatherings that translate into action. Because often they are, and I agree that dialogue is important, but then dialogue needs to be translated into action. And that's what we need to figure out how to do consistently. So yeah, totally agree. I see Linda has her hand for a long time. Is that still?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning. I want to start, this is backwards. Don, I can't thank you enough. I met Don and sometime after 1988 when I was at Essex County College, and he spoke to my students around 1990. And Don's a person that says, do this. And I'm like, I don't want to do, I got to get up and do it. And Don is the same person or similar to several other mentors and leaders I've met ever since 1987, I guess. And Doreen, it's great to see you. I'm at peace. I'm cleaning the beans out of my teeth. And I'm retired now. Those 2 years in COVID made my life better, not worse. And I'm listening and I'm just enjoying listening. I just have a comment and a question. The comment is, kudos to Doreen. You look great. I'm excited for you. I'm happy for you. I'm living in Jersey City. This is my home. Every time I try to run away, I come right back home. So I'm living here and life is just getting better every day in Jersey City. It's wonderful. Don, I'm just so glad you're still alive and well and moving around. You're not retired. You're doing your second, third career. So thank you for that. The lady that spoke, Eve, I didn't hear most of it. I was cleaning out a drawer, but I know, here's a question I have. What you're doing, I'm all for. And I think Doreen had to, Don had to, I separate from my father's family to have my own life. And all of my years of teaching, therapy, everything, I am so clear and cleaned out like sinuses. Just last night, talked to a friend from high school. She was a fighter, I was a studier. We are banding together in America because there are young ladies going to college who need our help. They need my academic help. They need her help to keep them safe on the campus. And we've always been close. She was crazy. Where were you? I said, I'm fine. She said, I love you. I miss you. I was like, I'm okay. I'm okay. And she was crazy. Where'd you go? We got to get together. So people that I know who know the left hand and the right hand, there's so much that needs to be done in schools in the United States. That's going to be my commitment here. The thing I'm going to share with you and ask you is that I'm not going to get involved in the really hard, like, you know, they're going to have a civil war thing, but I know what I can do. I know I can save a life and help a life. I take my homeless friends lunch sometimes. Don't do that. I'm going to do that. And they're good to me. So the things I can do, I'm going to do on a small scale. But you being over, I was only in Kenya one time in 95. I had a major nervous breakdown. I was only there 11 weeks, didn't last the whole time. But that was enough to show me I was so honored to be in Kenya to see what was going on. And I came home and I still put it on my resume. So when you have to do the hard work, I take my hat off to you. Because I know myself. I can't do but so much that way, but I know I can change a life. I've been fired from more jobs, and the kids said you're the best teacher, but administration said get out of here. So I just saying to you, I have a thought, may not come true. There's a Peace Corps. Ooh, I can do stuff now. Or I can just stay in Jersey City and do it. It doesn't matter. I wake up every day and I ask my God, what do I do today? And he tells me what to do. So there's now, I'm so excited to be retired and see every day I can help someone, a woman, a senior woman, a homeless man every day. And they're all nice to me in my building. So I know what I can do. I'm excited about that. But the challenge of changing things, I know how hard that is. And yet here I am. If Don said, not just so Don said to do it, but I don't know how Don is still here. You know, he was cocky in high school and they let him graduate. And then he was cocky again and he got married. I don't know how he even has, I don't know how he lives. Like he's, how old are you? I'm 67. He's still here with a house. You know, the way he talked, he probably, he told my students, I made $2.15. Your wife didn't divorce you? Said no. And the next day, I remember that first speech. He said, and your wife didn't divorce you? What? And now he's like among my top 5 heroes in America from the islands here. My grandmother came from the islands. I'm just excited to be here. And, you know, I've traded places. Doreen, I know what you were thinking years ago, and now you're there, and I'm where you were, and I'm very happy to live in Jersey City around all kinds of people. It's great. And my dad's friend did not want me to stay here. I stayed here. I had to get an order like, leave me alone. I'm in Jersey City. So I'm excited. I know what the troubles are. I know what I can do. And I'm just saying, I don't know how you go from here to fundraising, to getting things done. I'm not afraid anymore. I'll go into the worst country. It don't matter. Either I'll die here or I'll die there. It don't matter. So I'm just asking you, should I do something again? I could, you know, if I could take trips, I can do it. If I want to, I can take a trip with Indiana University graduates. I can take a Peace Corps thing. I can sit here and do something here. As long as I do something good every day, it makes me so happy because I was in corporate America only 2 years and 3 months. That was it. And the rest of the time, I'm glad I was a teacher. I never made money. The kids are fantastic. And, you know, I don't know, are we really going to change the world or what? I just know I'm not going to satisfy myself with the bad stuff. I have to do good, or I'm not supposed to be here.
Well, actually, I should call on Rosalind Parker, who's here. Are you there, Rosalind? Because she has a company called Travel to Do Good. And so you might want to hook up with her at some stage as well. Are you there, Rosalind? Oh, she might have stepped away from her.
Yes.
So
Her picture is blank right now. I'll send her a message.
All right, okay. But I totally agree with you. And, you know, absolutely, you're never too old to do good and to travel and to make a difference in people's lives. I had a really amazing meeting yesterday with someone who's on the town council in the town that I live in here in South Africa. He spent 7 years in prison. And his father disowned him because he and his brother had done, his brother is also in prison for murder. But in his case, he's turned his life around. He's got all kinds of ideas about how to turn this town around. This town is a classic apartheid town. It's still living in that era. And I want to help him. He's asked me to be his mentor. So now I found an opportunity to work here where I am, to support people who really need it. He said, I need help with my English, I need help with this. But he's managed to get to the point where he's kind of a kingmaker on the town council. And I want to support him to see how much he can use that as leverage to really make some inroads in this town, because it's a town that's laden with all kinds of dysfunctional dynamics. And so, yeah, I mean, it's wherever you can make a difference and wherever you have that opportunity, I really encourage everyone to do that.
Yes, great. Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? Ms. Kaylin, I'm going to turn it over to you if that's okay, according to our agenda.
Absolutely. You know what? I thank you for that, Doreen. I will defer. Don Vipri is in the room, and I do know that he has remarks on behalf of both of us. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Don, but again, I want to say thank you to Eve and Sandrine and Doreen. Thank you all for such a rich and meaningful conversation and the time together. And thanks to each person on this call. The one thing that I'm reminded of, and I pulled this out just now, is the pioneer, civil rights pioneer, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who said those words, I have only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but in eternity is in it. Thank you for such a powerful and meaningful conversation, Eve Jacobs. I turn it over to our very own Dr. Don Vipri. Don.
Thank you, Kaylin. And on behalf of the DV Connect network, I'd like to say that we are abundantly grateful to Eve Thompson and to Sandrine Kashongwe for providing us with a few insights of their precious journey, which also notably punctuated several critical life lessons for all of us. We applaud you for your tireless and good work, for your loving dedication and devotion to the plight of marginalized populations around the world, and particularly in Africa. We know that this will inspire all of us to do more to make the world a better place. And I also would like to say that our journeys, all of our journeys, result in compound experiences with paths that intersect and sometimes lead to the unfurling of divine providence, which awaits our recognition and our tests to see if we can use our construction abilities to build upon it and to take it further, and to constantly understand that these paths along our journey are paths that are significant, because as we cross the paths of others, we must also recognize that they are crossing our paths. And so we're exposed to different environments and different persons and different experiences at these intersections. This intersection that we've had today collectively will inspire each of us individually, but we must remain connected. A few days ago, during my travels, I had the privilege to visit a mentally alert, bedridden, 101-year-old woman who knew me from my childhood. As she lay there helpless in this government nursing home, she was so overjoyed when I walked into the room, and she was so surprised that tears just rolled down from her eyes. She was grateful for the visit, as she constantly cried, because as she lamented that soon I would be gone and there would be no more visitors for quite some time. She talked openly about her loneliness, the chronic absence of people whom she used to know, and her longing for just a taste of a piece of orange or a piece of chocolate. As with most elders that I visit, before my tearful departure, I was compelled once again to humbly ask for counsel and advice for the remaining of my journey. Her simple and poignant response, which is applicable to all of us, and with a deep stare into my eyes that pierced my soul, she said, "Be kind, be loving, and do good." Once again, I was overcome. Naturally, before my travels ended, you know by now that I had to fulfill my promise, and I returned again with the orange and the chocolate and watched her infectious smile when she tasted both of them. Obviously, we had very long and emotionally charged goodbyes as we both agreed upon the unpredictability of our journeys, but with secure steadfastness that I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be loving, and I'm going to do good. And so we have, in closing, deliberate decisions to make. Do we focus on developing the quality of the relationships and experiences while utilizing and sharing our gifts and talents in the passionate pursuit of our mission and purpose? Or do we just move on? Do we mindfully and intentionally connect the dots and build upon these connections and allow the creation of a zone to occur that may foster transformative moments of divine providence? Or do we just move on? Be the captain of your vessel. I deeply extend my appreciation and gratitude to our Divine Visions Connector Network attendees, our special guests, Eve Thompson and Sandrine Kashangwe, our Zoom host, Andrew Frazier, and our facilitators, Doreen Bethia and Kaylin Dines. Thank you all, and continue the journey.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you.
a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eve.
Thanks. Nice to see all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Doreen, for inviting me.
Thank
Good
you
job.
for joining. Thank you for joining. Good to see you.
I'm gonna sign off. Thank you,
Good.
Don.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Don, for the invite. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Sandrine.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you.
I was looking to see if, oh, Eve did sign off. Thank you, Shadira. Thanks for being here. I see Eve signed off.
So
Sandrine,
Sandrine, you're still
thank
on.
you.
What are you up to, and what is next around the horizon for you in the next few weeks and months?
Oh, there's something showing up on her screen. Can you hear us, Sandrine? Can you hear us? I don't know if she can hear us. Is this?
Sandrine, can you hear us, Sandrine? Sandrine? Okay.
Our audio is reconnecting.
Okay.
I don't know if she can hear us. Can you hear us, Sandrine?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Great,
All right.
great.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Don, could you
Yeah.
repeat your question to Sandrine?
Yes, Sandrine. What is on your horizon for the next few weeks and months as you struggle to be a difference maker and a change maker there in Kinshasa and the Congo?
Yes, actually, as Doreen, I think, mentioned it, I'm a missionary. So it's been hard with the COVID. We couldn't work, but for the next 2 months, we'll be again doing some missionary work for young people and adults, bringing some hope and love in their lives. And Italian embassy is offering me a permanent position. They really want me to stay there for a long time. So yeah. So I'm thinking about whether taking the position or keeping my freedom to manage my time differently. So yeah, but the horizon for the next 2 months will be missionary work, working with vulnerable people in in pain, and help them going through their struggles and their issues with the help of the gospel.